And I figured out really quickly that he was having bad behaviors in math class because he was bored. So I asked for an Algebra 1 or pre-algebra textbook. And they said, oh, Sam can't do that. I said, I'm willing to bet he can. Eventually, I got him a Algebra 1 textbook and started teaching him algebra. And he thought it was fascinating. He thought it was a code to decipher. And he excelled with that.
Hi, welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And if this podcast has been encouraging for you, please leave us a good review. Each review really helps, and it helps other families like yours connect with us. Today, I am welcoming Terrie McKee to the podcast. Terrie is the founder of IAJ Ministries and a homeschooling mom. She speaks and writes on homeschooling with an emphasis on homeschooling children with special needs. She also speaks on survival homeschooling, which is a timely topic for those who just experienced Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Her life's journey has taken a lot of twists and turns, with the most challenging event occurring in 2015, a violent tragedy when her husband was shot at a rest area and paralyzed from the waist down. Terrie has a riveting story we can all learn from. In the midst of trauma, she has truly learned it's all about Jesus and ministry to others. So, Terrie, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thank you, Zan, for having me.
So, Terrie, let's jump right in to your story and maybe start when I think you were in middle school or junior high school, as we called it then, when you came to Christ.
Sure. I was 12 years old, and I did not grow up in a church-going family, a Christian family, really. I mean, we were like good people, but good people doesn't mean you go to heaven, right? So I was 12 years old when my dad just up and decided to go to church with us, take us to church one day. And so we went to this church. I'd never been in a church before. And
okay, so you had never been in a church. Okay.
This was the first time. And the pastor preached verse by verse in the Bible. And he was on the book of Revelation, which is like, always wanted to get the crowds in, right? So, and I was just spellbound by what he was saying. And my grandmother, who I grew up in, both my mom and my dad lived, in the same home with my brother and I, and my mother's parents also lived in the home with us. That was one of the stipulations when my dad asked my mom to marry him, that she could bring her parents with her because she was the youngest daughter, number 9 of 10 children. And so he said yes. So I always grew up with really 2 dads and 2 moms. But my grandmother, she had a Bible and she was a Christian. And when I expressed interest after going to this church about Christianity and wanted to learn more because I could not learn enough. she just sat me down with her Bible and was teaching me from her Bible, a 1920 Schofield Bible. And
I have one. I have one of those from my grandmother too.
yes, and I still have that. It's one of my most cherished possessions. But the pastor was preaching on Revelation, and I knew that I did not want to be left behind when Jesus came. And so it was as if when I was sitting in the altar that Sunday, or not on the altar, in the pew, it was like the altar had a rope on me and was just calling me to it. And Jesus was just calling me. And it was like the first time I audibly heard God say my name and like pull me to him.
Let's go through the high school and college years and tell us a little bit about what happened in college.
Like I said, I was saved at 12, and then middle school, we moved around a lot in my middle school years, which is a terrible time to move around. And then in high school, I was actually homeschooled for the first year of high school.
Really?
Yes, and that was like in
Wow.
1984, 85. Back when in North Carolina, homeschool was still slightly illegal.
Yep. That's when
And
we started, 84. So
yeah,
it was very illegal here.
yeah,
So
it was very illegal. And so, but my mom did not like how public school back then in 85, the track it was on. But we did not know what we were doing. We had a lady come in to help us set up the homeschool. And back then it was like very important that the fire chief come and look and make sure you had exits in your house. It was the strangest little thing. The only things I learned from that year in homeschool was how to make a grilled cheese sandwich. Very important. And I was studying about the space shuttle that cold January day. And I had we used the PACE system with all the little workbooks.
Yes.
I think it was the only thing available then. I don't know, but it was what we used.
Right.
And so I was studying about the space shuttle. And then my mom said, hey, you're studying about the shuttle. It's on TV. They're about to launch it. Why don't you come and watch the news and watch this shuttle? And I was like, what a great idea. And then the Challenger blew up. And I remember
I know. I was watching that with our kids, and I just remember that like it was yesterday.
I know. And I was like, went back to my notebook, and I was like, that's not supposed to happen. And so we were engrossed all day long on that tragedy. But in high school, that first year of homeschooling, we just truly did not know what we were doing. And my mom focused way too much on life skills, like I ate the grilled cheese sandwich and laundry and whatever. So we just my brother and I decided to hold ourselves back and go to public school. And
that was back in the day, really. Now, I was fortunate because I had already come into contact with BJU Press curriculum. But they were the first year we homeschooled, nobody would sell to us with teachers' helps or anything. But my kids were younger, they were 4 and 6, not in high school.
Right.
So I can imagine that was really hard then when there was no guidance and no help. For that. Yeah.
Absolutely no guidance and no help. And my mom, bless her heart, she tried really hard, but she never graduated high school. So she didn't really have an understanding of what it was supposed to be like.
Right. So then y'all went on to public school, and I guess you graduated from there.
So I graduated high school. We won't say when, but I graduated high school. And at this time, I went off to a community college, which is a great idea. I'm a big proponent in community colleges. Saves a lot of money, and you get your first 2 years of college in. But I transferred to a 4-year school, and I was dating this guy, and he was the first guy who ever showed an interest in me. And I was I was naive and very shy again. And he just kind of took advantage of that and weaseled his way in. And um, unfortunately, I got pregnant by him. And we married 3 months later. Sam was a very difficult child from the get go. And it wasn't till later that he was diagnosed with autism.
Well, and then there was not the emphasis on finding out if your child has special needs or is autistic. I mean, that was not part of the whole cultural.
No, it was the whole culture back then was it was like 1 in 300 children were diagnosed with autism. Now it's like 1 in 25. So there were no supports, no help, no nothing. When we thought autism, we immediately thought of Rain Man, that movie. But there are varying degrees of autism. The marriage became very abusive after I found out I was pregnant with my second son, Jacob. And because my ex did not want another baby, like Sam, he would say. It was Ash Wednesday in February, and most people just give up chocolate for Lent. But he came home and I said, we need to talk. And we went to the bedroom and I said, look, this is not working. You're abusive. I want a divorce. I want full custody of the boys and the house. And he fought me on the house.
Once the marriage ended, I love how you started praying.
Yes. I said, Lord, you know my taste in men. And I said, I said, you find him. You find the next man for me. And if you would, I just want him to be a godly man and be taller than me. And it was my 6-foot prayer, I said. Because like I said, I'm 6 feet tall. And that very night, I get home and Greg calls me. He was living in Asheville at the time. I was in Gastonia, and we had met in church years before. We ended up dating starting in December, and we're married a year and a half later.
That is an amazing story. So let's fast forward a little bit to when your oldest son, who is the one on the spectrum, autistic, your oldest son is a senior in high school, actually. Tell us what happened then.
Sam was being bullied without mercy because of his autism, and he was in a self-contained special ed class. And he had a lot of behaviors, but he really wanted a friend. He was bullied and told by these guys at the bus stop at school, getting onto the bus, that if you touch that girl's butt, for example, behind, we'll be your friend. Or if you lick the concrete, we'll be your friend. And it got to the point where many meetings were held between me and the vice principal and other people. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to teach Sam at home. And I just want his textbooks. He could still graduate and walk with his friends, but I want to pull him out and have him at home. So I did not formally do the whole homeschool registration of my homeschool, whatever. I kind of worked with the school but taught him at home. And he had been doing this thing called menu math, where you have a fake menu and you order these things off the menu. You have to add them up, then you have pay with a $20 bill and do the subtraction. But he had been doing menu math for about 6 years, and he never progressed. And he was bored. And I figured out really quickly that he was having bad behaviors in math class because he was bored. So I asked for an Algebra 1 or pre-algebra textbook. And they said, oh, Sam can't do that. I said, I'm willing to bet he can. And so eventually you have to advocate and push and push.
Right,
And
right.
so eventually I got him a Algebra 1 textbook and started teaching him algebra. And he thought it was fascinating. He thought it was a code to decipher. And he excelled with that. Sam graduated high school, and then we were looking at having a rising kindergartner. And I talked to Greg, my husband. I said, look, I saw the writing on the wall with public schools. And I said, I do not want to continue. I do not want to put Laura in public schools. And he was like, well, let's homeschool her. And so we started homeschooling her.
Now, when did you realize that she also had special needs?
When she was like a year old or 18 months old, she was not even walking yet. And so we had her evaluated. She had low muscle tone and she wasn't walking. So we worked with her and got her therapies, and she eventually learned how to walk. And then when because of that, she went into a preschool for special needs kids. It was kind of like a daycare where they did concentrated therapies. And it was at that point that she was evaluated, and she had a speech impediment. And so she got speech and language therapy there. And then we noticed that she had trouble. My husband has dyslexia. And so we noticed in kindergarten that she had trouble with language. And then we fought. Everything's a fight, but we fought and got her a diagnosis of dyslexia. And that radically changed how I taught her and spelling and language. And it was a real struggle for her to learn how to read. But we were doing it. And then I know we're coming up to this, but it was she was being homeschooled, and then Thanksgiving happened. Greg and myself, our youngest son, Jacob, who was a freshman at Western Carolina at the time, and I, and our daughter, Laura, so it was just the four of us, went to Lynchburg, Virginia to see his parents for the Thanksgiving holiday. We stopped at a rest area about an hour away from our house, and on November 28th, 2015. And when we walked in the rest area, we saw that there were two guys just hanging around the rest area. And we didn't think anything of it because, Greg said later, he said that he thought that they were truck drivers just kind of stretching their legs, which is not out of the realm of ordinary.
Right.
So, after Jacob and myself and Laura went to the bathroom, we were outside waiting for Greg, and he was still in the restroom. And these two guys were just looking at us outside, and Laura was burning off all this energy, being 5 years old. And those two guys just kind of sized up my son, who was like built and all this. And then they noticed that my husband wasn't with us. He was still in the restroom. And they turned and walked into the rest area, went to the men's bathroom, and I heard this big bang. I was like, what in the world's that? And those two guys, they were running out of the sliding glass doors. And when those sliding glass doors opened and they were running out, I heard my husband screaming for help. And Jacob picked Laura up, and we ran inside, and we found Greg face down in the men's bathroom. He had been shot in the back. Those two guys it was attempted armed robbery, and they kind of freaked out when they shot him, and they left, but they did not take anything. And they were sentenced. They were caught, thankfully, that year. The the actual shooter was caught 5 days later, and the other guy was caught in New York. He had fled about 2-3 weeks later. But it radically changed our entire lives. That singular moment, Zan, we have now in our family before shooting and after the shooting.
Now, how old was your daughter at this point?
5.
She was 5. Okay.
She was
So this
5.
was your first year of homeschooling her.
Yes,
Was
first
the
year.
same year he was shot.
That's right.
Okay.
And we had, and come January, when life got back to a new normal, I hate that term, but it is what it is. Our pastor gave us some really bad advice and told us that we could not handle taking care of Greg and homeschooling Laura. He did not understand homeschooling. He did not support homeschooling. And so reluctantly, we enrolled her in public school. And she was in public school the second semester of kindergarten, all of first grade, all of second grade. And in second grade, she got the diagnosis of having ADHD. And I remember sitting in an IEP meeting and at the end of second grade, and they're telling me my daughter cannot read on the second grade level. She's not doing this, not doing that. They want to hold her back. And I said, no, we're not holding her back. I'm homeschooling her in third grade. And they said, oh, you can't do that. You're not qualified. I said, oh, yes, I am. And I just slid the paperwork across the table to them. And I said, this is our homeschool name. She's unenrolled. I'm withdrawing her right now. And withdrew her, took a break for that summer, and started August 1st in third grade. But by Christmas, she was reading on grade level. She went 3 grades in 4 months.
Just from being homeschooled.
Just from being homeschooled and having concentrated one-on-one time.
So what do you think, Terrie, makes homeschooling so effective with kids who have special needs? Because that is one of the largest growing segments of homeschooling today.
Absolutely. Homeschooling is the ultimate IEP. An IEP is an individualized educational plan. And the issue with public schools and IEPs is that they have classrooms of 20, 30 kids who might all have IEPs. Even if they have 15 kids, they all have IEPs, and the teacher just cannot, in effect, no harm on the teacher, no shade on her, but there's no way you can do an individualized educational plan for 15 kids in the same classroom. And homeschooling allows you the freedom to teach to that child's strengths and weaknesses, and gives you the freedom to do things that normally you could not do. My husband plays wheelchair basketball and wheelchair tennis, and we go all over the country for games and tournaments and matches and whatnot. And we take Laura with us, and we stop at, Lord, so many museums and like different things. And we do homeschooling on the road schooling. And we would not be able to do that if she was in public school. She would miss school, but she learned so much being on the road. Homeschooling gives you the freedom to teach to your child's strengths and weaknesses, and really gives them like truly individualized education. Now Laura is fascinated with cosplay. And she's like developing this character and everything. And so I recently worked with her on an essay, and because I'm teaching her how to write an essay, right? Because 9th grade, you need to learn how to write an essay. Simple 5-paragraph essay, but I'm getting her to write it based on her character she's creating. And so I've given her the outline of what to do. And because I can teach on something that she's interested in, her
Mhm.
interest of this character in cosplay, then yes, she's learning how to write an essay, but it's enjoyable for her. It's not just
Right.
write something that the teacher wants her to write and it's boring. She's
Right.
invested.
Right. Right. So so we know that homeschooling really does work. I mean,
Yes.
homeschooling just works academically, period. But when you have children who are who have special needs or dyslexia or those types of things, it
Right.
really is effective because of the one-on-one being able to teach those life skills. I
Yes.
want to just for a minute, because of what we've just been through with Hurricane Helene and Milton,
Yes.
um, let's talk just for a minute about Hurricane Hugo,
Yep.
which hit. I'm trying to remember, boy, it hit us hard in Columbia. I know it hit y'all hard in the Charlotte area. We were
Right.
without power for like 3 weeks,
Yes.
and I'm in South Carolina where we lived. And but you talk a lot about survival homeschooling
Yes.
when you hit times of trauma. It could be like the shooting of your husband,
Yes.
or realizing for the first time you have a child with severe learning needs or learning problems,
Yep.
or it might be something like the hurricanes that leave you homeless or without power, or
Right.
like you had an instance on your property where you lost how many trees?
We lost 75% of 11 acres of trees. The thing about crisis homeschooling is that in a moment of crisis, academics could take a back seat because it's about survival. And I just think about the people in Western North Carolina and what they're going through. And it's, you're focusing on getting shelter, getting food, getting water. That's critical. And your children will learn from that. That's powerful life lessons, but they don't need to learn about, you know, the academics right now. Just hold off on that. Their kids are resilient. We forget that.
Mhm.
And they will pick up on the academics at a later date. Um, I would encourage families, if they have, some families lost everything, including their house.
Mhm.
So they may not have a book to read, but some do. So if you have a book to read or the Bible to read, you know, institute like family reading and read together as a family every night, just for that structure and that sense of normalcy.
We have.
And Hurricane Hugo was my senior English teacher, because I was a senior in high school in 1989, graduated in 90, got that out of me. But um, one thing that my senior English teacher did after we went back to school after Hurricane Hugo hit was she did this phenomenal thing where she gave us 6 different projects to, like, we had to write a poem about Hurricane Hugo, an essay about how Hurricane Hugo affected us or what happened that night.
And those are things that homeschool families can easily
Absolutely,
do.
yes. But what she did, and we didn't know it at the time till much later, was that was helping us process this trauma that we went through.
Mhm.
And doing these things helps kids. I mean, if you have a little kid, have them draw what happened. Do these creative artistic things, and that helps. And I would dare say the parents should do that too. Join
Mhm.
in this activity. And that helps you process this tragedy and this trauma. When my husband was shot and my mom took the reins on homeschooling Laura during the, you know, December of that year,
Mhm.
she had Laura draw pictures on what happened that night. And Laura did that. And they were like little stick figures and whatnot, but that's okay. But it helped her process this traumatic event.
Mhm.
You're going to be dealing with this trauma the rest of your life. We deal with Greg's trauma of being shot and paralyzed every single day. There's not a day goes by that we forget about it.
Mhm.
But it helps us to process it Um, like I process it through writing. I've written a book about the shooting. I wrote extensively about the shooting on my blog, nearyouraltar.com, after the shooting happened. And homeschooling is great for this type of situation.
As we wrap everything up, share some of the Bible verses because I know I was on your website and blog earlier today, and
Yeah.
there's several verses that really popped out to me. So share some of those verses, Terrie, that have been so meaningful to you.
This one's very timely for the hurricane that hit North Carolina. But it's my life verse, Isaiah 54:10. And it says, "For the mountains may depart and the hills be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you." I thought about that verse so much in the last, well, when my ex-husband left and I was a single mom. And even though these mountains, the mountain of this horrible marriage was removed, and I was facing this uphill battle on being a single mom, the Lord God gave such peace during that time to both me and my boys.
Mm.
When Greg was shot and paralyzed, and there are those traumatic first few weeks of this time period, that Bible verse just was instrumental in making sure that even though no matter what happened in my life or in my family's life, that God would not leave us, and He was still there, and His peace would reign, and that is certainly what has happened. I never thought that my husband would play basketball, but he's coaching this year now. He's coaching his team.
That's amazing. Your IAJ Ministries, tell us what that stands for.
IAJ Ministries is an umbrella organization that has my blogs under it, as well as my speaking career and where I do conferences. But IAJ Ministries is something that it stems from.
And all right, what does the IAJ stand for?
IAJ means it's all Jesus. It's all Jesus, because every time I speak and someone comes up to me and thanks me and says, "Oh, great talk," whatever, I always say it's all Jesus, because it is. I could not do this without Him. And so when I was developing and starting this business, this company, I was like, what am I going to name it? That's the hardest part, anything is naming it, naming your homeschool. That's like the singular hardest decision. But I was like, it's all Jesus. IAJ Ministries. So I love that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. So, if you had any advice for moms and dads today, what would that be, Terrie, looking back on your life, all the scripture that you've read and the people you've ministered? What would you
Oh
say
my.
today?
Focus on Christ. Just keep 100% focus on Christ, and everything else will fall into place.
It really is like that verse. He works all things together for
He
good.
works all things to good, and for us who believe in Him, and
right, who are called according to His purpose.
Absolutely.
That's right. My pastor used to say, we have this feeling in America that everything's going to work out. But he said it's not like that.
No.
It's like God rolls up His sleeves and comes down from His throne in heaven and works it out.
Yes.
And causes it to work together for good.
Yes.
Because He loves us.
Yes, absolutely. We love our children, right? And we want them to succeed, and we put into place, and when we're homeschooling them, we teach them the things that they will need to know. We teach them how to read, do math. We teach them the Bible. We teach them life skills. All these things that they will need to know for the future. So when we go through hardships and traumas and tragedies, I have stopped saying, "Why me, Lord?" I've stopped saying that. I say, "What do you want me to learn in this?" And that shifts the focus on from me, like inwardly, to what do you want me to learn? What are you teaching me here? And that's a whole mindset shift that really helps you in the moment roll your sleeves up like God does, according to
Yes.
your, and
Yes.
your analogy, and get going on it.
And we do that for our children, and we learned that from our Heavenly Father.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes, yes. So, well, Terrie, thank you so much for being here today. And tell people one more time if they want to get in touch with you or find you, where can they do that?
Sure. IAJministries.org or homeschooling one child. The one is in a number one, child.com. So homeschooling1child.com.
Okay. Well, your story and you are such an encouragement for us. It reminds us from like those verses in 2 Corinthians 1, where when God comforts us, then he gives us the opportunity to comfort others. So thank you for being that person today. And as always, you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. We thank you for being with us today. We pray God's blessing on you and your family. And until next time, bye.